And for all those people listening to us, this is a first for George and I. And we're terribly excited to be here with you all. And we had a few glitches, but true to the Buddha nature of George, we were able to overcome them by not getting terribly nuts about the whole thing. So anyway, so here we go. Let's let's dive in here, George. You and I, like every time we call on a Sunday, we can go for hours, can't we?
Yes, this is true. It happens when we just have a lot of experience.
Well, or the gift of gab, which
both,
which I think both of us do have, which is kind of fun. So here we are. People have come to listen to us talk, and I can't think of a better partner to have because of your connection with Chicago over the years, and the fantastic work you did with Buddha Nature, Phil Jackson, and Michael Jordan, and so I write about this in my book because it's really relevant, and here you are live, and I consulted with you. You know, I talked to you before I got this book done, and I asked you if what I'm doing is okay, meaning, am I out in space someplace or am I getting this right? You know, and you said, oh no, you're getting it right. It's all right. So your guidance was very inspirational for me and enabled me to trudge forward with the concepts that are in this book that are life-changing for a lot of reasons other than sport.
Yes. My job is to help people be who they are and encourage people to express themselves in a way that resonates with them and is going to be very beneficial for the all, for the greater good.
Yeah, the book itself is written with a vehicle called sports. And that vehicle of sports I find in my life personally, and I think you found this too to be true, George, is that vehicle of sport is a really good bus. You know, you get up on the bus and you go someplace. Yes. And I use the bus because I like this. When I look at buses going through the city, it always says coach on the side, right? And you and I are coaches, and so the bus brings us someplace, and so sport is a vehicle where we can get to know ourselves better and have a really more peaceful, kinder, stress less life, and so I want to make it real clear that this isn't just for people who have jock energy, but people who just want to learn from sport or learn from life how to up your game either way, no matter which way you come into it. Have you got some thoughts on that?
Yes. When the Mindful Athlete, The Secrets of Pure Performance, when I wrote the paperback, I had to write a little, I don't know if you call it intro, whatever. And the metaphor I used is life is a marathon. And like any marathon, you have to train for it, like an athlete. And if you start off too fast, that won't work. If you start off too slow, that won't work. So you have to find your own pace. And if you want to finish the race, you have to train for it before you get out there. So with life being a marathon, we're constantly training, learning, growing, and figuring out. Sometimes it's like a marathon. Some parts of the race, there's a big hill. Sometimes we can go faster. We need to slow down. And sometimes we may have to pull off and go, use the restroom, or we may have to get some hydration. We might have to get some water or whatever. And so to me, we have to train for that, for life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so, but at the same time, we have to train so that we can finish the race.
Mm-hmm. It's a great analogy. I love it, and it kind of reminds me of the river analogy too. Because if you look at a river, uh, like a marathon, you go from one place to the next place. It's point to point, and the river is point to point, and it narrows. And when it narrows, you go really fast. And when it
Mhm,
opens up and widens, it slows you down. And uh,
mhm.
it's interesting. So the marathon analogy is right on. I really love it, and I think a lot of people out there, uh, if we want to jump into this book, I think a lot of people, I've had this reaction because there's a lot of people who study Buddhism, and I'm not a Buddhist, but I read a lot about Buddhist thought, and I apply it to my life every day, and I apply it to my work with my athletes. But the thing about this book is when you look at it, the competitive Buddha, it's like, what? Buddha's like sitting there zazen on a mountain under a tree, and there's no time to compete. Uh, so I done the research, and what the research unveiled to me was that the Buddha himself was quite an athlete. I mean,
Mhm.
he was like at the top of his game when it came to wrestling. I mean, no people feared him in terms of like they're not going to beat him, but he wasn't worried or he wasn't thinking about beating his opponent. Uh, so the competitive athlete is the competitive Buddha is the Buddha was a competitive athlete, but he competed in a different way than we compete today, George, don't we? Doesn't he?
Yes, and actually, his last name was the definition of his last name was warrior class.
Mm-hmm.
He was from the warrior class. So
Right, right.
so and his one of the wise men at birth said he had two roads. One road was to be, a renowned king, or to go the road of the, holy person, to,
Mm-hmm.
to, to open up a whole new way of being. And he
Yeah.
chose he chose the way of the spirit.
Mm-hmm. And that way of the spirit reminds me of getting back to the competitive Buddha. Is he followed a path that was different, and if we go back to the Latin word for competition, many people might not know this, but the word competition in Latin means compatiere, and compatiere translated means to seek together. So the
Mhm.
Buddha wasn't interested in beating you; he was interested in bringing out your best performance.
Mhm.
And so that, George, if you and I get on a basketball court, and I just happen to have my game that day, I'm going to force you to dig down deep and find out how good you can be and bring out your best performance. Be the best version
Right,
of yourself, right? And
right.
and then it goes the other way because we'll meet on another night, and boy, your game you'll have your complete game, and I'm not going to win that game, but I will win my journey. I will win the day because you're forcing me to dig down deep and find out what I'm made of. So that's why that title is called The Competitive Buddha. And it's not an oxymoron, and it's not contrary to Buddhist thought. In fact, it is the thought of the Buddha, and it is a Buddhist way, for sure.
Yes. So a lot of the Buddhist teaching has to do with skillfulness, or making wise choices, being wise, and at the same time relating in a way where you're generating goodwill, you're generating peace, harmony, love, and compassion, that sort of thing. So people don't realize that you compete that way. Of course, on my journey, people would always ask the question, some variation on, isn't it antithetical to be teaching mindfulness in competition? And I would say to them, no, because you're not competing against somebody else. You're competing against your previous best self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you do it that way, and then when you're doing it, when you're competing and you're coming together to compete against the other person, you get beyond the illusion of separateness, and you just
Mm-hmm.
want to compete, and you want to encourage the other person to meet you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
I
feel.
like what you just said. That was beautiful. The illusion of separateness.
Hmm.
Uh, I live here in Santa Cruz, California. It's still sunny, as you can see. Uh, a block from the ocean, and there's two islands out there, and everyone talks about them being separate. Oh, this island, the South Island, there's the North Island, as if they're separate. But
Hmm.
if you put on your diving gear and you go under that water, guess what you find out? They're connected.
Mm.
There is no separateness. That
Right.
island on the north is connected to the island on the south. It's just that the land is a little bit lower, but there's an illusion, and the illusion is created by the water, right?
Yes, and if you think about the Bering Straits, when it was a land bridge before the water got over it, there's some theory that that's how people came to this, to America. And
Yeah.
so there, at some point, when you think about it, it was a land bridge. So yeah, just because you can't see the connection doesn't mean it's there. And so that's a very appropriate metaphor, Jerry, that you use about, you have to go deep to see the connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you think of
Mm-hmm.
water as consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
then then it's something about being able to go deep, being able to understand, even if you can't see it, there's a connection there. But if you dig deep, if you investigate, you will see that there's a connection.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to just take that to mean that when I have a good conversation with you, we are digging deep and we're trying to find out who we are,
Yes.
or I'm trying to find out who I am through my conversation with you, and vice versa. And the way that shows up athletically is the same thing because we're on the same court together,
Mhm.
or it's on the same
Yes.
pitch, the same pool, or whatever courts.
Right.
And we're going to not force each other, but we're going to give each other the opportunity to go a little deeper and find out what we're made of.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a
Yes.
marathon. We're going up Heartbreak Hill. You live right near Heartbreak Hill or somewhere
Yes.
around there. But you're going up
Yes.
that hill and you're coming after me. Boy, you're gonna really force me to find out what I'm made of. And do I have what I think I have? Or
Yes.
is that just or is that an illusion? I thought I had it. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well. Yeah. Well, it's amazing that when we can get up and we're playing the game and something about there's something about athletics. I notice, especially when I work with corporate folks. There's an ability to be more vulnerable when we can frame it in the context of athletics, athletic competition. It's just something about being able to talk about teamwork, or talk
Mm-hmm.
about someone that's expressing themselves where they're going beyond what we perceive as being limited. We're always
Mm-hmm.
pushing that limit. We're always
Yeah. Yeah.
pushing what's possible as a human
Yeah.
being,
Yeah.
and so it's. And I always like the fact that if you're talking about a game or a season, there's always a beginning, a middle, and end. Whereas life, we don't have that demarcation of, okay, or what we do on some level when we talk about big birthdays, if we want to look at things in terms of decades or centuries, depending on if you're an
Mm-hmm.
archaeologist, geometric time, geological time is very different. But at the same time, it's good to be able to measure and reflect on whether we're achieving our aims
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and whether we are making
Well,
progress. Yeah.
I I purposely had an impact. I'm going to just put up the cover here for a minute, but I had an impact on designing this, and I picked this circle. It's in Japanese. It's called Enso or Enzo, depending upon how you want it, a Z or an S. And and that circle takes me back to what you just said, which is there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. But I think that's an illusion as well. And I don't see a sporting event where it's linear. You go from here to here, and let me just say, I don't see life as being linear. You go from here and then you die. And so this circle to me is a constant reminder that when I go into competition, or maybe it's a work situation, maybe I'm in a corporate environment, or maybe I'm a teacher at a wonderful school, whatever it happens to be, if we think of it as circular, so let's say the game begins at this time and it's going to end at that time. What we think about it as we've gone around the circle, collecting data and information about ourselves, who we are, challenging ourselves, finding out about our opponents, which I don't even like to call them opponents. They're our partners, right? I mean, we don't
Mhm.
have to oppose them. We want to embrace them.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the game, it might be the end of the game by the clock, but it's just the beginning of the next game. And we go
Mhm.
around another circle. But the next time you go, you went around this circle, you're up higher. So we begin again. New
Mhm.
game, new evening, right? And then what happens is we take it up another notch. So life becomes circular. So at my age now, I'm at the top of this spiral. Not quite at the top, but I'm up there pretty high. You could tell from the color of this and stuff. I've had a few years, and and what happens is I look down from the top like I'm on a mountain, and I see where I've come from. And every year there was a May, every year there was a June, every year there was a July, every year there was a fall, winter, spring, summer. Every year I went to work on a certain date. There were Thanksgivings every year. And I look back and I learn, oh, in 1996, this is where I was on Thanksgiving. And this is where I was emotionally, spiritually,
Mhm.
physically.
Mhm.
So we always have that constant reminder, don't we? That life is that circle, but we just can't keep going in a game. There has to be some kind of ending for the game, but
Mhm.
the lessons learned and the full development of our human capacity, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, continues to go in this circular fashion, and hopefully it continues to go up with some dips here and there. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. The circle is the symbol of the self. Joseph Campbell talks about that. But round and round, right? Every beginning is a ending, and every ending is a beginning. So it's definitely that. And then you have to take time out because we can't run perpetually. Just like our cars, you got to put gasoline and you got to change the oil. You got to do these things, or you got to call time out so you can exchange bodies where you can make adjustments and stuff. So there's
Right.
definitely this ebb and flow that happens, and we have to rejuvenate ourselves. We can't just keep going without feeding ourselves and getting the recovery, the renewal that we need.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that metaphor of the circle is very appropriate. And yeah, it's symbolic on, and I love the fact that you put it on your book. And I think when I think about it, when you and I had conversations about your book when you were writing it, and that sort of thing. So I'm curious if people probably interested, how you came to write this book. Like
Mm.
why the competitive Buddha? Where did that come from? Why was it like talking about this, getting beyond this illusion that they're separate, but they're actually connected. And I think that there's probably a lot of curiosity about how you got to that, because you've
Well,
written a lot of books, and you've had quite a life. So why is that so important? Why was that so important for you to write that at that time,
let
or
me
this
let me
time?
give you. That's a great, profound question for me. The profoundness is something I contemplate often with that question. Like, why did I do it? I mean, I had been writing all these books, and I was using Chinese Lao Tzu and the Tao. Well, it turns out I was also using Buddhist thought, but I just never wrote about it. And I
Mhm.
was working with teams, and we used the mindful meditation stuff that you're so good at, that you write about. And uh, but I need to say this first, and that is when I came across the Mindful Athlete, your book,
Yeah.
when I saw that book and it was in black, that gave me permission to open up to trying to write a book on Buddhist thought. And I was
Mhm.
going to do it in white. just for the contrast. So there's the white, but there's the black.
Yeah, gotcha.
And it's not just black or white, it's both black and white. These are the kind of ways that I think about it. I went to bed one night and I had your book in mind, and I said, oh, this is great. I love this book. I knew about the good work you were doing with Phil in LA and Boston. Geez. Uh-oh. How about Chicago? So I felt that I could write a book like this, but I wasn't about to begin one. I had just finished another one. I woke up on December 19th. I remember the exact day, the morning, and the time in 2019. And I had this image, this feeling of writing a book with that Enso circle on the cover. That was my image, because I think a lot like this. I got out of my bed. I ran to my office, which is only about 25 steps. And I sat down and I just wrote out bullet points. Boom, 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 boom. Got up at 6 a.m, very excited, very much into writing this book, or seeing if the book was possible. And I started doing research online. After three and a half hours, I realized, wow, this is worldwide. We have people in Nepal who are athletes who are using Buddhist thought. We have people in Chile. We have people in Argentina. We have people in Japan, all over the world. And of course, being familiar with Phil's work with you and your work with Phil, I knew that this was not a concept that would just like, what? You kidding? You can't do that. I knew that there was some way to get in and make my points clear and have clarity. So after 3.5 hours, I just got so excited. I just kept going and I just kept collecting information. But the thoughts were in me. I tell people, and I'll say this now, this book wrote itself. It wrote itself from that day. 3 months to the day, I had a manuscript in the hands of my agent. 3 months. The whole manuscript. I mean, it wasn't perfect and it needed work and all of that, but I gave it to my agent. He got back to me in less than 15 minutes, which I didn't expect. And he said, I love this book. I can sell this book. And I was like, that was it. And that's why 3 months. I mean, I wrote 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I'm a binge writer. And, I just, once I get going, I just can't stop. And I love being in that zone of quiet and shutting out the rest of the world and being on my own and just putting thoughts down as they came out. And so what's interesting is I gave it to my publisher and he sent it out to 18 my agent, he sent it out to 18 different publishers. And I had several rejections in the beginning, but my top 5 hadn't answered. And one of the top 5 was Mango, and they got back to me. And this is an interesting story because your editor or the person at Parallax Press for your book, The Mindful Athlete, was someone by the name of Fish.
Yeah, Nancy Fish.
Nancy Fish happens to be a close friend of Brenda Knight, who works at Mango, who was to be my new publisher. So when she saw your book, this is again your influence, because Nancy Fish had your book, Brenda Knight wanted a book like that. And I did a different book, different color, and all of that. But it was your inspiration for me to get out of bed and write this stuff down. And it was also, and the fact that I had been using this stuff for years. But when Brenda told me that she knew Nancy Fish and she just had to compete with her, she had to go at it. She had to raise her level,
raise her game.
Raise her game. And let's see if we can do a book that's higher than George's, like in a nice way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
right. Like the Buddha competitive way. And I think they're 2 books that stand on their own. They're both really good books. And I think yours is a compliment to mine, and mine's a compliment to yours. And what we're doing is we're setting a standard, and we're role models for people out there younger than us who are thinking along these lines anyway, and we're going to encourage them to write. And what we're going to do is we're going to have an impact on changing the world of sport, and the world in itself, because that's really where this all goes.
Mm-hmm. So, Jerry, did you have particular questions you wanted us to engage in during this process? Because I know you and I, we can talk, and we can go in many different directions. But I'm cognizant of what you want to accomplish and what you would love us to talk about. Not that what we're talking about is anything wrong. That's great, but I just want to make sure that
I know what you mean.
that we stay on task to what your intention is for
and
us
what I'd
talking.
like to do is I'd like to get to see if there are questions from the audience out there, and we could answer. Maybe I can address those. But thanks for saying that, George. I really appreciate it. I think we'd be remiss if we missed the opportunity to say something about servant leadership. Yes. It's a concept that's over 2,000 years old. In fact, it started back with the Buddha, but yet in 1970, it started to come about, and people started getting really excited about servant leadership. But I really do think that in this world today, honestly, this is one of the most important parts of this book, is whether it's coaches or CEOs or heads of church, heads of state, generals in the army, no matter who you are, parents of children, we have to really start to look at the model right now, because a lot of leadership in this country is changing, but it's not changing fast enough. And so many leaders are using antiquated methodologies that are just outdated, and they're using a more transactional model rather than the transformational model. So it's reactive, and whereas my whole thing on leadership, and I know you agree with this, George, because we've had these conversations, is a more transformative way to lead people. And so let me just say a few words about that. And I know you'll chime in here whenever you see it as appropriate. Servant leadership is beautiful. If you want an example of servant leadership, those of you who are sports nuts, watch Steve Kerr coach. Watch Pete Carroll coach. Watch these people. I remember watching John Wooden, the late, great John Wooden coach. Watch these coaches. Watch what they stood for. They came to the arena of life, working with sport. And in this book, I'm really clear in making sure that we understand that the idea behind servant leadership is not to lose power over people, but to gain power with people. So using your power to connect, using your power to collaborate, using your power to change the world through other people. So the word, I'm big on acronyms, George, and you know this. My acronym for this particular situation on servant leadership is GIVE. So when I think of serving, I think of giving, right? I mean, I'm coming here to give. This is what I'm doing right now, and you're doing it as well. We're both giving.
Right.
G stands for, when you look at a Steve Kerr, genuine, authentic, like you can't believe. The I stands for integrity and also inspiration. V stands for vulnerability. You've got to be vulnerable. In fact, a lot of people think, well, if you're vulnerable, that's a weakness. No, that's actually a strength. You got to be really strong to be vulnerable. And let's face it, when you see someone who's vulnerable, you like them. You might feel uncomfortable yourself being vulnerable, those who are listening, but you always admire it in other people. It takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable. And the E is to empower. So when we look at that in an environment where we're talking about one that's collaborative, connective, cooperative, magic happens. And in this chapter, I talk a lot about Steve and I talk about Phil and other Hall of Fame coaches. But what I like about what I put in there is I've also given you ways that I have learned from these great coaches how to be transformative and how to help other people by serving them. So I have another acronym, if I may. I'm calling these acronyms jacronyms because it's Jerry acronym, right? It's just something silly. But so this jacronym is called RIVER, RIVER. And let's do a test out here. Everyone that's listening to what I'm saying, tell me how you feel. Tell me what it does to you if I make you feel the river effect. And I'll go through the letters RIVER. R meaning relevant. What happens when I make you feel relevant? What happens if I make you feel important? V is valued. E is what if I make you feel empowered? And what if I make you feel respected? Well, we've done studies about this, and you don't have to do a longitudinal study to realize that everyone that's listening to this and anyone that I've ever talked to, athletes included, when I feel that river going through me, when I feel relevant and important, George, when you make me feel valued, I'll do anything for you. I mean, you want to play basketball and the floor is dirty, I'll get down on all fours and I'll lick the floor with the dust. I'll do whatever it takes. But the most important thing is we've learned how you feel is how you function. And servant leaders are all about making people feel relevant, important, valued, empowered, and respected. And when you feel that way, you're going to perform at a higher level. I always perform at a higher level, as opposed to if I walk into an arena or a room and people are making me feel less than, or they're making me feel like I'm not good enough, or I'm too old, or not smart enough, or whatever. My confidence goes down, my energy goes down. I don't want to perform. I walk out and I don't feel happy. So servant leadership is really not about being a slave to somebody. It's about serving them in a way so you can help them realize their full human capacity. I am here with you. I want George to realize his full human capacity in our relationship now and every day. And that's what I'm talking about. And that's what the great leaders do.
Wow. That's really appreciate that. And as you were talking, Jerry, I was thinking about Eric Fromm and a little book he wrote called The Art of Loving. And when he
Yeah,
talks about in that
beautiful.
book, he talks about you if you love something, you make it grow. So you labor what you love and you love what you labor for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he talks about this idea of the care for the person, which is another way of saying relevant, important, some of your river. You care for the person, but you respond to their needs, spoken and unspoken, in a healthy way. And he talks about respect. You have to allow them to be who they are and respect them as they are, not as we would like them to be. And to do all of that, you have to know them. You have to have some knowledge of them so you know how to care for them, how to respond to them, and
Mm-hmm.
how to respect them. And of course, I've taken the liberty of adding putting something in front of the love, self-love. And to be self-loving or self-compassionate, that means we have to have self-care,
Mm-hmm.
self-responsibility, self-respect, and self-knowledge. And
Well,
so when you think about that,
that's
that is what you're
that's so
talking about. That's just another take on it.
that's so important. You bring up the word compassion. I think it was Phil Jackson that said, "Without compassion, we would have never won any of those championships."
Yes,
I'm sure you
yes.
had an influence on that. There's no doubt in my mind because of how I know you. The compassion piece is so crucial. Kobe Bryant talked about compassion,
Yes.
compassion for yourself. Because when we
Mhm.
think of the Mamba mentality, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're closer to this than I am, but my take on the Mamba mentality was with that self compassion, you don't have to be afraid of failing because you're not going to beat yourself up when you fail. Am I right? See? And so Kobe would go into a game. He might make mistakes, errors, have setbacks, maybe not win the game, maybe have a terrible game, but he wouldn't beat up on himself because of compassion. He knew he'd come back another day, and he'd learn from that. And that's part of the Mamba mentality too. Learn from your failure. I bring this out in the book, how failure is my biggest teacher. I mean, if those of you listening here, I mean, I'm going to say I'm the biggest failure you've ever heard. And I cop to that because I take chances, I take risks, and I'm always getting knocked down, but I always get up and learn from it, and I go forward. And I didn't realize this, but that's a very Buddhist approach to what you've been given in life. And so I don't need to give it a name. I just know that we can all develop that trait, and we can all get into the headspace and the heart space of being self-compassionate, because boy, we need it. Wow, we do.
Yeah, it's I appreciate you saying it, because I'm thinking of Kobe's first playoff experience, and he shot, I think, 3 air balls. And so when he left LA and went back home to where he lives, he called the custodian, and the custodian let him in the gym, and he shot for 8 hours. So that's what you're saying. And in my book, I talk about this idea of success is 99% failure.
Mm-hmm.
So you fail up, and we learn from our mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not growing, and you're not. And if you're not out of your comfort zone, and you're not growing.
Yeah. You're not out of your comfort zone.
Right.
You're not in the arena. You're not in the arena.
Right.
Getting your face dirty, right?
Right.
As
And so
Teddy Roosevelt, I think, would talk about that.
Yeah. So you talk about all this stuff in your book, and it's amazing that you're making this available, and you putting it in terms where people can understand them. And these are profound principles, whether we want to talk about the Tao or Buddhism, but it goes beyond whatever name we put on it. These are universal. The thing about principles I love is that they're universal, timeless, and self-evident. You can see for yourself. And so this book is full of that, full of that process of principles, profound principles that allow you to be on your journey of self-discovery, to be a competitive Buddha, if you will.
Yeah, I like that. A competitive Buddha every day. Like, you get up in the morning and you're not an athlete, or I don't believe you're not an athlete. Of course, I believe everyone's an athlete, but it's just lying dormant. That's an aside from other stuff I've been thinking about. But let's say you don't claim that. It's okay. The thing is, you can go about it with these same values and these same detachment. Excuse me. Knowing that when you let go, you let God, and you're able to detach, and you're able to understand the impermanence of things, and nothing's forever. So you win 6 championships in a row. Then what happens is you wind up losing 6 championships in a row, and in life you get 6 opportunities to do this, but you lose 6 opportunities. And it's once you see that, to me, boy, we're really getting into this now. I'm just thinking, all the suffering that's going on in the world today, and in our own life. So ask yourself the question: how am I suffering? We go back to the Buddha, who says, basically, the Buddha's like a doctor. The Buddha's like your doctor. The Buddha diagnoses. So what's the diagnosis? The diagnosis is that there's suffering all over the place. Come on. I have some kind of a quote here, since we're going off into this direction. I don't know where it is now, but everyone is suffering. Everyone has. Oh, here it is. Excuse me. Let me read this. Robin Williams, right? Robin Williams. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always. Robin Williams. But the Buddha talks about suffering, and he says, yeah, suffering's all over the place. So that's a diagnosis. The cause of it, and this really helps me. And George, I really love the fact that you say I make it available. And the reason I make it available is because when I read Buddhist thought, there are, I mean, I don't know what's going on sometimes. I don't know what they're talking about. So what I need to do is I need to take the time to digest it. When I was reading the Tao Te Ching for the first time, I was lucky to have a partner who could translate the Chinese into a language that I would understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so to simplify the Buddhist the Buddha way is think of him as a doctor who comes in and he diagnoses that, yeah, we're all suffering, but the cause of that suffering, to me, simplified, this is a simplified version, is we're not getting what we want, or we have what we don't want. Those two things, yeah. So I don't want this disease. I don't want this house. I don't want this relationship. I don't want this day off. I want another day off. I don't want this job. You're going to suffer if you keep going into that. Or you want what you don't have. I want that beautiful house. I want that amazing car. I want this. I want this. I want more playing time. I want more minutes. I want more points. I want more friends. So whenever we're locked in to those kind of concepts, you're going to suffer. So think about when you're suffering and times are hard. Yeah. But, you know, suffering is not pain. Pain is something very different, right, George? And pain is something. Pain is something that it's not an option.
Mm-hmm.
Suffering becomes an option, something that if we go through the Buddha mind, we find out that why am I forcing and pushing and trying to make something happen that's not supposed to be that way, you know? And we suffer so much because of it. I know you're chomping at the bit here, and I'm going to stop talking because I know you've got so much more wisdom to you know, sprue here.
No, you're doing fine. The thing is, the suffering is there's when you were talking, I was reminding me of the quote I had when being in recovery. Uh, we used to say, "Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional."
Mm-hmm.
So the Buddha talked about the two dot there,
Right.
like you throw darts theory. So one dot causes the pain, then the second thought is our relationship to it, whether we embrace it or we try to suppress it or get rid of it or whatever. So we add pain to the pain, so we can open to the pain, and by opening to the pain, it's you can manage it versus creating suffering. And so the
Mm-hmm.
suffering, this is the thing. And you talked about craving or what we want to call attachment, but craving and ignorance. And then he talked about there's a cause, and then there's a release from it. And relief is obviously the Noble Eightfold Path, but it's really about letting go. We want to simplify it, just letting go and letting be, and accepting things as they are. And then in that space between stimulus and response, choosing how we want to relate to it in a
Mm-hmm.
way that leads to peace. Because I say there's a suffering that leads to more suffering, and then there's a suffering that leads to peace.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's attitudinal. That's the acceptance of it, and just saying, yes, this is how it is. I did my best and we lost. I'm still a winner because I'm better today than I was yesterday. Instead of letting the society decide what a winner is, who a winner is,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
really about just doing your best, and that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the word acceptance that you threw out there. You just sort of threw it out there, but boy, that's really the crux of it, isn't it? The idea of
Yes,
accepting and not
yes,
like I look at life sometimes growing up, and I'm thinking it shouldn't be that way.
yes.
Well, wait a minute, it is that way, and it's supposed to be that way. Maybe this is the lesson in this incarnation I'm supposed to learn, and maybe it's a way that will get me to the next level, even though it not feeling good. So accepting what is and understanding, and that goes back to that thing I said in the beginning. I think now I'm starting to understand when Jan says no delays are not bad. It's like accept if we have a delay, like today we had a delay of an hour. It's not bad.
Hmm.
I accept it. I accepted it. We fought through it. We came up to a solution, and that's it. And so that acceptance gave me some peace of mind.
Yes, that is the interesting thing. If we understand the lawfulness of the universe and we understand everything is happening because the conditions is by nature, it's natural for what's happening to be happening because the conditions are such that it's happening. And
Mm-hmm.
so once we can embrace what is happening and say yes to it, and then generate the hope, then we can choose. So what
Mm-hmm.
you talked about of seeing delay is not a problem. Well, the research says that 99%, 90% of our long-term happiness is predicated on how the brain and the nervous system interprets our experience. Not 10%,
Mm-hmm.
90%.
90. Mm-hmm.
90%. And so if we can look at things from what I like to call growth mindset or from love, that you like to talk about, then we could see the silver lining and we focus on what we want versus focusing on what we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
That's heaven and hell right there. You
Yeah.
can depending on that. And so just being able to embrace it. And it's something I shared with you, I think before is when I heard that Kobe Bryant passed away in the helicopter. I thought it was a bad joke. I was at this particular university watching a game, and I was I mean it was devastating and it was interesting, but once I was able to see the fact that something like nobody goes before their time, and I was thinking, okay, so hopefully his family's not with him. And I thought about, well, if he died and his daughter lived, that would be a problem. If he lived and his daughter died, that would be a struggle. But what happened happened, and once I embraced it and saying, okay, what can I look for? What's the silver lining here? And when I realized that Kobe is going to have an impact on people in such a big way, on the universe in such a big way, he could live 100 years and not have the same impact. And so being able to see that, and I had Kobe and my sister Linda and my friend Bobby all pass away within 7 days, and I had to make peace with that and just thinking that nobody goes before their time. Things people die because the conditions were right for that to happen. And so to the degree that I can embrace that and say, okay, I don't like it, but that's what happened. And then I can, once the acceptance really helps with the idea of what I call the 4 A's: the awareness, the acceptance, the compassionate action, and then the assessment, what worked, then assess how it worked and what adjustments do I need to make it better. But being able to say yes to that. But having said that, um, I'll just talk about my own experience. Now, when I was taking my mother somewhere, this was back in 19, I don't know when it was. I want to say 80, maybe it was 89. Was it 89 or I forget when it was, but it was sometime when I was living in the meditation center, and I was taking my mother somewhere, and I realized she was going to die because I had to drop her off early, and I started meditating on her death like 20, I don't know, 20 years before she died. So on some level, my ability to let go when Kobe passed away had to do with the training I've been doing for decades about,
Yeah.
I don't beyond death. Everybody dies, and I used to do this training where I'd be watching direct TV like I'm watching A Christmas Carol, and DirecTV would tell you the description of it, then it tells you the actors, and it tells you when the actors were born, and I was going through dead, dead. All these cats, some of these cats were born in the 1800s, and so I started realizing that everything we do today sets up tomorrow. So even though I was reflecting on it, but I had this practice of accepting the fact that we are born, we die, we get old, we get sick. There's none of that. And to the degree that I accept it, I don't like it. But if I accept it and start to see, oh, that's a natural progression. Death and life are two sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm. Or there's a reason for everything, and
Yes,
our
even though I
job
may
here.
not understand it, but at some point, if
Right.
I
You might not
investigate,
know.
that's pure.
Right. You might not know now, but at some point, the life the life unexamined is not worth living. It has been said. However, if we continue to examine, we find out at some point, perhaps we find out what is the reason for all the things that have gone on and why this happened and this didn't. George, I'd like to, boy, oh boy, I'm just like, we can go on for 2 hours with this one. This is a good one. But we have a couple of questions here.
Great.
I think let me just read one of the questions here. Lisa, hi. Lisa says, what was the one particular thing that inspired you to write this book? Well, I talked about that already. George did. On a deeper level, if I want to get really metaphysical about it and really dig down deep, I think there was a deeper reason other than just wanting to continue doing good work for people. Is I'm not looking to make a living off of anything I write. I'm looking to make a difference. And the reason why I say that is because this book, if you're an athlete, if you practice athletics or sports, you would, and leadership, you are going to get a lot out of this book. I mean, this is going to steer you in a direction, much of where George and I are talking about. But really, to answer your question, I wrote this, don't forget, as COVID was coming upon us. And all of the writing of this book took place in that first year of COVID. And why is that significant? Why is that relevant? It's relevant because there was so much fear in the world and very little faith. And so I write this book and I talk about fear and I talk about faith. There's so much angst and so much stress. And people, like, we don't want COVID, right? And we're trying to force it. Maybe COVID is here for a reason. I become philosophical. Maybe there is a reason on some level. But I don't want to go into that. That's another whole conversation. But to Lisa's question, I wanted to write this book because I really do think during a time of crisis, there's an opportunity. In Chinese, the word for crisis means two things simultaneously. It means, on the one hand, it means danger, right? And on the other hand, it means opportunity. Translated, it's something like opportunity blowing on a dangerous wind. So here was an opportunity for me to take on a crisis and to write and publish something that would help people through this time of fear and time of uncertainty, right? That's the other thing. And also detachment from all the things that were changing in our life. There was so much that's changed, and you have to admit, for the better. But when I talk about these principles and these values from a Buddhist standpoint, my hope and dream was that I could do something, give people more hope instead of fear, and to enable them to have skills, strategies to cope with these uncharted waters, as we say. And so that's the answer that I have. There's another question there. I don't know if, let's see, Krishna. I know Krishna. Hi, Krishna. So many sports encourage aggression. What is the biggest challenge turning that around into more of a competitive Buddha attitude? And I want George to address this too. It's not a challenge for me. I don't see it as difficult. And part of the reason is the work I'm doing. If people are going to hire me to work with them, they already know what I'm about. So they already bought in. So it's easy for me to make the journey from their head to their heart. Okay. Like, look, it's from here to here. It's 18 inches, but for most of us, myself included, it's like a lifetime. So basically, when I'm hired to do the work I'm doing, I know that the people doing the hiring already love the work that I'm doing. So I don't have that as a challenge. It keeps me on my toes. I want to make a suggestion, and that is, I don't talk about aggression because it has certain negative connotations, but I like to substitute the word, instead of aggression, let's call it, what's a good word? Another word that begins with A. I just had it and I lost it. Not aggression, but assertion. There we go. So if I'm assertive, I'm going to put my best foot forward by definition. If I'm aggressive, I'm probably being aggressive against someone else or something. Whereas I don't want to do that. I don't need to. That's not necessary. But anyway, George, I know you're chomping at the bit there to jump in there.
No, you're doing fine. What I will say though is, just that is when you're being aggressive, you're winning and not being compassionate with yourself or the other person. And when you're assertive, you're asserting yourself, but your intention is not to harm. Your intention is to encourage the other person or the opposition to meet you in a way that's fair, and the rules of engagement are about how can we play, and then at the end of the day still have a relationship with each other.
Beautiful.
But the aggressive thing that's coming from the what I would call the from survival mode or from scarcity, thinking it's not enough and I have to destroy the other person, instead of saying no. All I have to do is just express myself in a way. And so, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that the aggression is a lot of times is coming out of fear. It's coming
Oh,
out of this idea of not knowing if
wonderful.
if
Yeah.
I can win fairly. So I
Yeah.
had to be willing to do whatever, and people love that. People love, you hear it on TV. Oh, don't help them up. You can't help them up. Let them stay there. Step over them. And that's the old school where you want to carrot and stick, or you just want to use force. And what I know about force is when you use force, then there's an opposite force on that, but you have to continue to exert force. Whereas when you use love or assertiveness or power, power flows, has its
Hmm.
own energy.
Power to, as opposed to power over.
Yes,
Power to,
power too.
power,
Yeah, just
power
yeah,
to,
just
power
yeah,
to
just
influence.
being in alignment with compassion and love, and
Right.
and just following there's a current. Just get in the
Hmm.
current and let it carry. You don't have
Right.
to swim against the
Flow.
stream.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so that's flow. That's how I look at it. But you're right. There are a lot of people think anger. Anger is just one level, but there's more energetic emotions than anger, like
Hmm.
love, compassion, enthusiasm,
I like the fact
joy.
you brought out the word fear when it comes to aggression, because some people will think, well, he's being aggressive, he's not afraid, but the aggression comes from fear.
Hmm.
And in fact, uh, when you think of the word fear, you said scarcity as opposed to
Yes.
abundance. If you break down the word scarcity, I always thought this was funny. If you break it up, it says scarcity.
Yeah.
Scarcity. It's a place where you're scared, where you're fearful.
Right.
And when we're fearful, we tend to become more aggressive. When someone's becoming aggressive verbally with me, I like to just be quiet and say, "So what are you afraid of?" Just
Mm.
ask that question. So, what are you afraid of? And it stops them cold blood because you're not coming back with them. And unless you're aggressive with them, there's no fight. And so it's like an Aikido move where you join them where they're at,
Mhm.
and
Right.
they're at the aggressive place. And you're saying, well, what are you afraid of? And then see what
Yes.
happens. Yeah.
And you like the acronyms. So the
I love
acronym for
acronyms.
fear is false evidence appearing real.
I love it. I love it, George.
So that's
Brilliant.
it. It's like it's all an illusion. It's like, okay, if you see it that way, but you can see it
Yeah.
another way. That gets back to the 90% of happiness is predicated on how you interpret things. Oh, this is an opportunity. Oh,
Yeah.
this
Oh
something for me
my.
to learn here. Oh, that's
Right.
different. That
Yeah.
totally changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Well, I
totally
think
changes
we're
the conversation. Yeah.
we're getting close to the hour, and I'm always respectful of people's times, and I appreciate the people who came to this event. And you couldn't be more appreciative than I am to have George Mumford here with us. That was such a bonus for me because I know that he brings so much to the table, and he was inspirational to me with this book. So you need to know that, and it is on the hour, and I know you have families, and I don't know what time is it. 7 o'clock. No, it's 7 o'clock in Chicago. Time to go and eat. Time to. By the way, my wife Jan is from Chicago. I love Chicago. Everybody, it's a great town, and what makes it so great is the people. They are amazing people in Chicago, right? Yeah. So, what do you think, George? Huh? We're ready to fly
Yeah,
here, or
yeah. I think we're good to go. Just
I
just
think
just
Andrew
check out
Andrew's
this
in
book.
charge.
This
Huh?
this is an amazing book. It's
Well, thank
transformational.
thank you so much. I've got endorsements there. Steve Kerr wrote um, a beautiful forward, and he thinks it's my best book. I'm not so sure, but it could be. He's read a lot of them, but I think if anything, this book is closer to my heart than any other book I've written, and that's why I woke up at 4 in the morning to write it.
Yeah,
It was
maybe that has something to do with that servant leadership you talked about.
I think it could. What is that? What you're suggesting? That?
Yeah, I'm saying that you saw an opportunity to serve, and
Ah,
you responded to it.
yeah. That's really that keeps me right on track. So let me go serve my family dinner, and because I'm the cook in the family, and I am at home. This is my office here, and the sun has gone down. And George, I can't thank you enough, buddy, my friend, dear friend. This is the first time we've done something like this live. We have talks all the time, and they go on
Yeah.
forever. And I
Yes.
learned so much from you, and I know the feeling's mutual. And
Yes.
so don't forget, George has a wonderful book out there too, The Mindful Athlete, which is an amazing book in itself. So okay, I'm done.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I love you all.
Oh yeah, thank you for that. Love you all too. I mean, I'm not trying to. I really do. Uh, and the reasons are real clear. You're obviously here because you're interested in this way of looking at life. And how can I not love people that want to make more sense in life, right? So anyway, that's it. I don't know what to do at the moment.